Hi guys, welcome to the presentation of CSS for 4D forms. My name is Komoncharoensiri. I am the Director of Technical Services in the US. This is our agenda for today. Let's go ahead and get to it. One of the main questions about this presentation is why? Why do we use CSS in 4D? Now, one of the main or major feature that we have introduced in version 18 is the ability to convert a binary database into a project mode database. Now, this requires a lot of changes inside of 4D. And that change also has an impact on the style sheet support on form rendering. In order for us to maintain the ability to have the style sheet that you set in your previous database in the form of a project, we have to find a way to store that information in a proper format. So we chose CSS. It has all of the requirements and qualities that we were looking for. And also, CSS is widely used and accepted by many web developers. It also has a similarity to the JSON object notation. So when you look at the format of the CSS data definition, it is quite similar to the object format. It is also in the plain text. Therefore, you can use any of your favorite text editor to create, modify your CSS file. And it is also nice to have it in plain text. It means that it fits into the project mode paradigm. Now let's talk about attributes. CSS has a large number of attributes. The 4D may or may not support all of them. Now here's the list of a one-to-one map of a 4D attribute that does support inside of a CSS. Now the same attributes can also be found in a property list. However, there are more attributes that you can define in an object that can still be used in the CSS. So here are some additional properties or attributes that you can use in the CSS. Besides that, there are something that still needs to be excluded from the attribute support in the CSS. For example, the attribute that is classified as a CSS selector like type or class, those items cannot be added to your CSS. Or anything that needs to be evaluated, for example, method or expression, those needs to be excluded. Because attributes or CSS are directly support an object, not the form. Therefore, any form attributes that you have in your form definition cannot be used in the CSS as well. If you have any specification of an array or JSON pointer in your form definition, those things need to be excluded as well. On the right side, those are just a few examples that you can see. Choice list, excluded list, events, or even a reference to a list. Now let's talk about what happened when you convert your binary application into a project mode application. In your toolbox, this is what you usually see. During the conversion, 4D will put everything that you have in the Mac OS X style into this file, and Windows into this file. For the classic Windows, 4D completely abandoned it because it's no longer supported. Once the conversion is completed, these two files will be created inside the sources folder. If you open up your project mode application, you will see that there are 3 items listed under Style Sheet tab of the toolbox. Now the first item is supposed to be a file cross-platform style sheet for you, but 4D does not create this file for you automatically. When you are ready to create a cross-platform style sheet, you can choose to click on the Create button, and 4D will open up your default text editor, allowing you to create a new style sheet for it. For the second file and the third files, those are the files that are automatically created for you by 4D. And if you want to make any modification to it, you can simply click on the Edit button, and it will open up those files, allowing you to make any modification directly. Now, when you can convert a binary database into a project database, there are 2 main types of objects that we have to focus on. Objects that do not use style sheet and objects that do use style sheet. Why is it important? Because it seems to be pretty obvious. Let me give you an example. So in this form, there are 2 objects in there. The first one on the top in yellow is the object that does not use the style sheet. When you look at the property list, you can see that there are 5 properties assigned to this object: fill color, border style, font size, horizontal alignment. Once you convert this form into a project form, your form definition will look like this. And you see everything in bold. Those are the properties that correspond to the content inside of this property list on the right side. Now, at the same time, if you look at the properties from the project mode, it will look something like this. Really similar to the one from the binary mode. What about the second object? This is what it looks like from the property list point of view, except that let's focus on number 3, which is the style sheet. So this object has a style sheet associated with it. And as you know, the style sheet actually controls 3 things: font, font size, and font style. So font Monaco and font size 18 is actually driven by the style sheet. So when we convert this form into a project form, this is what the form definition will look like. 5 properties in bold. The one in red is actually representing a class named header style. Now on the right side, if we convert the property list that is being shown in the binary mode into the project mode, the very first thing you're going to see is the CSS class property. This is added inside of the object section. That is the only thing that's changed. For everything else, it will be the same. But this is what it looks like inside of the mac.css files. As you can see, the background border remains untouched because it's saved directly into the object definition. Font color as well, and the horizontal alignment as well. Before you're creating your own CSS rule, it is important to understand the type of selectors that we have available for you. So selectors are used to select an element so that you can apply that particular style to. And in 4D, we support 5 selectors: element, ID, class, universal, and attribute. So this screen shows a 1-to-1 mapping between the terminology that used in CSS and the terminology that we use in 4D. Element is simply referred to object type. ID refers to object name. Class, this is something new, so we're adopting the same terminology. Universal just basically implies to all objects. Attributes, this refers to a specific attribute with particular condition. Now, the type of object that you can use to create as a selector are these. So once you know the selector that you want to use, you can create a selector. You can create a rule that is based on the object type like so. If you have an object name, you're just going to have to start with a # or a hashtag followed by your object name. For class, it always begins with a dot or a period. For all objects, you use asterisk or star. And for specific type of attribute, you will use the attribute right after your class name or the type of object. For example, if a button action is equal to accept, go ahead and apply the style. If a text object has the value of hello, go ahead and apply the style. Or the last one, if the text object has the content that begins with the word hello, go ahead and apply the style. Order of precedence is extremely important to understand. It deals with the rendering priority. First, I'm going to talk about file level order of precedence. I'm going to give you an example of an object. And this object just happened to have an object definition that set its font size to 12. The same object has its style rule inside of the Mac and Windows.css set to 14. And also inside of the style sheets.css, which is the cross-platform CSS, set to 18 pixels. Now let's say all of these CSS rules exist and the definition. During the runtime and the rendering, 4D will use the top level, which is the object definition. It has the highest precedence over everything. Now let's suppose we remove that property from the object definition. 4D will use the second option, which is the second level. The 14 font size will be used instead. And let's say we don't have anything in the Mac or Windows.css files. Then it will resort down to the last option, which is the cross-platform.css. Now this is at the file level, okay? So let's see what's happening inside of the selector level. We'll break it down to 5 different levels. So from the top level down to the bottom, that is object name, specific attribute, class, object type, or all objects. On the right side, we give you an example of a simple object, text object. Let's suppose we have all of these rules created, okay? So if all exist and the form is being loaded, obviously 4D is going to choose the top level, which is the object name. Why? Because we have a matching object with the same name. And let's suppose we get rid of the rule from the top level, which is number 1. The next time we reload the form, it's going to use the second option. And that's because we meet or match the criteria that we assigned to a specific attribute. So text has the hello as the beginning of that text. Let's say we get rid of the next one down to the last 3. Yeah, it's going to use font size equal to 18. That's because the class name has been set to a header style. And let's say we have only 2 now. Well, because it is of the type text. Therefore, it's going to adopt the object type. And let's say we don't have anything else, but all objects obviously is going to use the last one, which is size 36. So it is extremely important to understand these levels and the order of precedence, because you could create all kinds of classes that interfere with one another, resulting at the end that you don't get what you were looking for. Because CSS support in 4D is something new, many of you may become unaware of what you need to do, or run into some problems that you might think that is a bug. So it is important for me to bring up some of the design challenges and things that you might not be aware of while designing your application using CSS. So the first thing that you need to know is that CSS is not active while you're in the form editor. It means that anything that you saved into the CSS file, even though you have an option to apply that CSS to an object, they will not be rendered in the form editor. It will only be rendered when you load the form in the runtime. And it also will only be rendered or loaded once at the beginning when you open up the form. It means that as soon as you open up the form, if you go directly to your CSS file and then you open up and make changes to it, that change will not get updated to your form right away until you reopen up that form. All changes in the property list that are saved directly into the object definition will supersede everything that you have in the CSS rules. Remember the order of precedence that we discussed. The highest level that your CSS rules will have to follow will be the object definition. Now, if you want to override anything, including the order of precedence, you can use the important tag or keyword right behind your CSS style. And that will take care of order of precedence. It will bring that rule and style to the topmost level. In order for us to see that, well, let's take a look at our demonstration. Okay, I'm going to start by opening up my example database here in the binary mode. Here's a form that I built to collect information about a candidate for HR purpose. As you can see, this form has several parts, different fonts used, different colors. So the very first thing I'm going to do is to just go ahead and show you what I set for this particular object. So down here, you can see right away that I'm using a style sheet, okay? And these font size and font are basically driven by this particular style sheet. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close this toolbox and run this form so you can see what it looks like in the runtime. Very straightforward. It looks exactly the same as what you saw in the form editor. Down here, this is a list box, okay? So the list box is built to store and catalog any documents given by any personnel. So if I want to, I can click on this option to display that particular document on the disk. Very straightforward. All right. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and convert this database into a project. So I'm choosing export and then structure to project. And right away down here, you will see that there's a new project folder created. I'm going to go ahead and restart this application in the project mode. Okay. So the form that is opening up right here, you'll see right away that there's something not quite the same. So this object, instead of having a larger font size, is going back to a really small size. And that's because the CSS, or the style that has been converted into CSS, does not get loaded in a form editor. This is exactly precise to the point that I made earlier, where the CSS will only be loaded during the runtime. So from here, if I execute the form, you'll see right away that the font size is larger. It has the right font that I selected in my style sheet. So let's go ahead and close this form and go back here and double click on the object. Now we have the property list display. Right here, this is my CSS class set to header style. Now, let's open up the toolbox once again, and let's go ahead and open up this file, which is the mac.css. So this file is created based on the style sheet that I have set in this window while I was in the binary mode. Let me close this. So you can see right away my header style CSS is determines what is going to be displayed for this object. Now the one cool thing about using CSS is that you can also combine your CSS with your styling that you can save directly in the object definition. For example, here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on bold for the object. I'll set it to underline as well. Okay, so right away, you can see the re-rendering of the object because it came directly from the object definition, not CSS. If I run this form, yes, there's a combination of CSS used and the property that is set directly into the object definition. So it's bold, underline, larger font size. Now let's close this. Let me show you what it looks like in the object definition. So I'm going to use a shortcut here. I'm going to drag this into the area. Sorry. I'm going to locate it by looking for the keyword candidate. Okay, so the last two options here are the two properties that I specified directly from the property list. So bold, font weight set to bold, and then text declaration set to underline. Perfect. So now, what if I want to set the font weight directly into my style sheet, which is the CSS. So let me go back here and perhaps assign font weight to bold, okay? And I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back to 4D, and this time I'm going to uncheck bold from here. So you can see that it's gone, right? Perfect. Well, let's run the form again. Hopefully it will change. Well, something is not quite right. So my font is larger, which is perfect. It has the underline, perfect, but it's not bold, even though I specified this bold property in my style sheet. Let's go back here. Now, this is normal. I just tricked you to think that I did something wrong. If you look closely to this property right here, even though I uncheck this checkbox, the keyword, the title of this property is still turned bold, the same thing as underline. So every time when you make changes to a property in the property list, this property stays intact. It means that even though you remove the property thinking that it should be gone from your object definition. It's actually not. So if I go back here to this file definition, you'll see that it changed from font weight bold to normal, right? So it means that this property still has the highest precedence over everything else. Now I can remove this property directly from this file, or I can go back to 4D and I can hold down the control key and click, and this will clear out everything that I have for this property. So when I go back here to this file, and I will go down here and look for the same object again, you can see that font weight property is gone. So now I can go back to 4D. If I run the form again, you can see that now it picks up my CSS style. And font weight is now bold. Very nice. So there's a couple of combination of things that you can do when working with style sheet, CSS. So this is just one example, okay? Now, let's go down here. Right now, the icon that I'm using here is for the Mac icon, okay, for a folder. And the terminology here is also Finder, which is represent the Finder of the Mac OS. What if this database is being used cross-platform? And what if the user prefers to see the correct terminology that reflects that particular platform? Well, obviously, this is not going to work, right? So normally what I would do in this case, I will have a code behind during the onload. I will check what platform I'm running on, and I will switch the icon to the appropriate one. And then change the title of the button to the appropriate one. But let's just say that we don't have that option. Now we can use CSS to take care of this issue for us. And let me show you how I'm going to do this. Let me go back to this form. First, let's take a look at this particular object. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and choose this property. I'm going to copy this particular object name. All right. Now, because I'm on the Mac OS, I'm going to try to force myself, meaning that I'm going to override something in this style sheet file. Otherwise, I will be making changes in my Windows version, okay, if I'm demonstrating this on Windows. But since I don't have that luxury, I have to do everything on this machine. So I'm going to first putting in my object name. I'm going to create a rule for it. So anytime that I'm loading an object with this name, okay, I'm going to try to apply this rule to it. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to set the text to equal, well, if it's Windows, it's going to be Explorer, okay? Now, also, I'm going to have to copy this. It's a path that I'm going to display my icon, okay? And this is the property I'm using, okay? So instead of the Mac folder icon, I'm going to use the Win folder icon that I already have in my resources folder. Okay, just like so. First, I'm going to go ahead and save this file. Okay, it's been saved from my shortcut. Let's go ahead and run this form one more time just to see what it looks like currently. Now, because of these two properties are saved directly into the object definition, meaning that here's a title You can see it's bold. And here's the path name to the picture is also bold. Well, even though I put this rule over here, it's not going to matter unless I have a way to override it. The way to override this is to put in important keyword. Okay, so let's start with that first. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and run the form, and you will see right away that instead of show in Finder, it's now show in Explorer. Perfect. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Save that. Come back here and run it. Now I have the correct icon and correct terminology for my button. So as you can see, if you want to build a cross-platform and you have to have a certain terminology or look and feel for that particular icon, you can use this option to override something that's saved directly into the object definition. And again, the reason why I'm doing this in this Mac.css file, because I'm showing you all of this demonstration on the Mac. Normally I will put this whole block in the Windows.css file, and that will take care of everything. Okay, so that's all the demonstration I have for you. Hopefully this will spark some ideas and give you some insights into the world of CSS and 4D. And I'm sure there will be more information coming up in the next few days or next few months about these features. So stay tuned. We'll see you soon, and that's all the time I have. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.